welcome back to the program, Dr. Nalaka Godahewa. So let's talk about what's going to happen as we move on, as we restart our country, the economic hardships we're going to have. Doctor, I want to start off with you. What is your forecast? How exactly do you see in the coming months? You know, we did not have a very, an economy that we can be, flourishing about and talking about a heavy number. It was like around 3% the economic growth. Now what's going to happen?
Actually, before the corona crisis, we were already facing a crisis. That was the economic crisis. When it comes to 2019, our economic growth had become one of the slowest in the whole region.
Below Afghanistan also.
Yeah, it was gradually coming down from 2015 onwards and year on year. And by 2019, the growth rate was just over 2%. And our stock market was one of the worst performing stock markets in the whole region. And our debt level had gone up to about rupees 14,000 billion. And rupee has depreciated. In every economic indicator, we were struggling. So corona came at that time. So it just made the things worse. Yes. Now, how do we go forward? Yes, when corona virus came, the entire world took it very serious. They had to, because it was a new virus. Nobody knew how it's going to react, how to respond to that. So they took precautionary measures. Most of the countries decided to go for this lockdowns. Sri Lanka was one of the earliest countries who took some drastic action on that. But now that it has taken a couple of months, we understand this virus better. We now understand that it's not such a deadly virus if you really look at statistics. We'll talk about that later. Now it is time to understand that reality, that we have to live with it. We can't hide from this. We have to live with it. We have to control it, but we have to live with it. So we have to get back to our normal lives. And that is where the economy matters. Our day-to-day lives depends on the economy.
Sri Lanka has a very high number of people who are daily wages. That is like the low tier in the economic structure. They are finding it very difficult, and the biggest scare that they have is when they get back to work, there will be no work. What are they going to do? Because people might be, scared to spend money and, put the money, the savings that they have back into the market. So how are we going to address this?
Yeah, this is the issue that we need to keep in mind. In an economy, every time somebody spends money, it becomes an income of another person. So that is why money circulation matters. If people don't have money, or people are reluctant to spend money, that affects somebody else's income. The problem with this corona is twofold. One, a lot of people will lose their income. Yeah. So they will not have money.
This is in the low economic.
Some other people will be careful about their spending. They'll be scared to spend. So both will affect the money circulation. So we need to very quickly find out how can we get this money circulation activated. That is where the government has to play a role. In any economy, when there's a recession, government has a role to play. Treasury has a role to play. The central bank has a role to play. Managing the fiscal policies, managing the monetary policies. And in order to increase the money circulation, you have to find some ways to get the money in. Actually, even this 5,000 rupees subsidy that was given by the government has a bigger purpose, because you have to give money for people to spend. Only when people spend money, it becomes income to somebody else.
The other question is the fact that, let's talk about the economic policies that we used to have. Actually, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's economic policy was, investment, getting more investments from various countries which we have not touched before. I think that might go out of the window as we move on, or is that the case?
No, I think we have to continue to look for investment opportunities, because you can't depend just on debt. In a situation like that, government will have to go and borrow. Private sector will have to go and borrow. Everybody will have to go and borrow. But borrowing is a never-ending vicious cycle. You borrow, you have to pay. One day you have to pay. So when you have to pay, you are in trouble. So therefore, rather than looking only at borrowings, we have to look at two things. One is investment, second one is equity funding to companies, corporates as much as possible.
Even the private sector.
Even the private sector. So even locally, rather than debt, we have to look for ways how we can bring equity because when you borrow, your burden goes up. But if you can get equity, you can develop your business, settle your debts, and one day you can pay back the debts and get back. Investment focus has to be there, particularly foreign investment. Focus has to be there. Of course, everybody will be reluctant, but there are opportunities also. Because take, for example, what's happening with China. A lot of countries are moving out of China, or rather planning to move out of China. Now, Europe, for example, has taken a policy decision to move out. Japan has taken a policy decision to move out. If that happens, I mean, China is our friend. We are not trying to steal business from China. But if that happens, then why not look at that opportunity?
There's a high possibility, most analysts say, that particular business might come to India, and we can actually get a little bit from that. What kind of investment opportunities do you see in the future? In what kind of areas?
No, it could be in many areas. You don't have to say specifically this or that, but in many areas, when these Western countries take a decision to take their businesses out, China was a key component of their supply chain. So then, where do they go? Most of these businesses will require high level of skill. And Sri Lanka is one country you can very quickly develop skills. Our workforce is such, even for electronic manufacturing, they can be trained very fast. So therefore, most of these businesses that might move out of China, if so happens, we obviously have an opportunity to go and grab that. But in order to do that, you need a scale. Because businesses coming out of China will require massive scale. There, the government will also have to intervene and support these people who will take businesses.
If you remember about, like, soon after the war ended in 2009, one of the key areas that the government, then government, and even the previous Yahapalne government, not successfully, but they were looking at developing tourism, and we wanted to get a lot of high-end hotels to come into the country. And at that moment, one of the things that was said by the hotel industry, the luxury hotel industry, is the fact that the labor we have is not skilled towards international level. I think we spoke about this last time when you were here as well. So how exactly the infrastructure is not there, Doctor? The skilled labor, the one that these people, like from China, if we are moving out from China, the Chinese quality of that labor is not here in the country. So how are we going to push that towards getting that particular assurance to those investors and saying, hey, come here?
Actually, you mentioned something very interesting. I've been speaking about this for a very long period of time. We say our staff is not well trained. Why can't you train them? Because you have no time. Tourism was growing, everybody was busy, there's no time to train. Now, in a crisis like that, the first thing that the industry should have come and asked, government support to maybe fund these people and say, I will train these people. Rather than say you pay their salaries, which many people came and asked the government, I think there could have been a better proposition to come and say, we will train these people, retrain these people, support partly. The government would have perhaps very gladly accepted a proposal like that. Tourism, the ministry would have gladly accepted a proposal like that. Even right now, we must look at that. Take this opportunity to train our people. We may not be able to employ everybody, but you might not be able to get rid of everybody also. You can't do that with Sri Lankan labor laws, particularly direct employees. So use this time for train. Develop their skills, so when tourism bounces back, we are ready. Even though we know that tourism is going to be one of the industries which will be hardest hit, personally, I don't think this is not going to be a very long period before it comes back. I
also have that optimistic view on this, because this is not one single country facing this crisis. The whole world is facing this crisis. In a time, the entire world wants to get back to work, and they really want, none of the countries, the big countries like America, in Europe, the UK, they don't want their economy falling apart. They want to make sure that they maintain that particular economic level, even China. So that means there's a high possibility. I think that this crisis might maximum 3 months, 6 months. What do you think?
So particularly if you look at tourism, we must not forget the fact, as you very correctly said, the entire world is affected. Tourism is a global business. It's more than 1 billion people travel every year for tourism. So let's say it comes down by 20%, 30%, the rest, where do they go? Where do they go? So that is where our opportunity comes. We are a country which has managed corona threat very well.
Yes.
We can be an example to the other countries. So if you communicate this well, and also if you have a proper mechanism in place to take care of the tourists who come here, the numbers will always be there. It's a matter of grabbing that. So not that entire 1 billion of people who were traveling last year going to stop traveling. This, it won't happen. Look at China. Once China opened up, now tourists are, the domestic tourists are going all over. So tourism is something like that, particularly after a long lockdown like this. People will want to go out, and they will be looking at places to go. So rather than saying the industry is dead and crying about it, we must look at these opportunities.
That is the problem. Why isn't this kind of thinking is coming from the industry? We see always every single time there's a crisis happening, and then they come begging. Please give us some money. We need to restart. I understand that. I very well understand that. But why isn't the thinking has changed for such a long time? We're not a country. Corona is not the first crisis we faced. We faced a war. We ran the country when there was war. Bombs were exploding in Colombo, and that time, still we did not stop. So a country like that. So why aren't we? The new thinking is very much missing.
I don't think it's fair to generalize and say that the entire industry is like that. But some people who were used to these problems all throughout and seeking government support probably look for government support for everything. That we shouldn't do. We shouldn't do that, because tourism is an industry which has a huge potential.
Yes.
Look, we were talking about last year it was about 3.5 billion maximum income we had. But what we were expecting is for that to grow to about $10 billion industry, because we said so, because there's so much opportunity. If you compare with the other countries in the region, then our arrivals are very small. If you take Singapore, Malaysia,
very
Thailand,
small.
10 times, 20 times more than our numbers. So from where we are, we still have a lot of opportunity to grow even in a crisis like that. So we have to look at these things positively. But the government also must step in, support them with the promotions, support them particularly with the connectivity. That is another very, very important aspect, because for tourists to come in this crisis situation, they may not want to take too many transit points.
Yes.
They might want
Direct
to travel
flights.
direct. So charter flights and all those solutions can be found if you are innovative and if you want to look for solution rather than begging for support.
Indeed, this is a collective effort. Everybody has to pitch in and actually get out of this. Let's take a short commercial break. When we come back, a lot more to discuss with regard to the economy and exactly what we're going to do. This is Get Real. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Get Real. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa, economic specialist who've been advising a lot of governments and also trying to understand exactly what's going to happen as we move on and we move out from the corona crisis. One of the areas that might be affected heavily, Doctor, seems to be the banking sector. A lot of borrowing. Even yesterday, the central bank has lowered the lending rates and all, asking banks to be a little bit lenient. One thing, as soon as when this crisis happened, people were very concerned about the fact that how are we going to pay our loans, because certain companies slashed salaries. Thank God it didn't happen here at Derana. But there was concerns, how are we going to pay back these loans? But then the government came and said 3 months moratorium, you don't have to pay. But then still, many people have been told that you have to pay the interest for those 3 months as well. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding between what's going on, what the government says, and this and that. What's your take on this?
I think, yes, these things have to be explained better, and also must be communicated better. Most of the policy decisions that were taken were good decisions. I don't think that was communicated down the line that much effectively. That is why this confusion is. When the government asks banks to give a moratorium or let's say bring down the interest rates artificially, we must remember they are also doing a business.
Yes.
Right? We can't just ask them to dole out money, because then the banks will collapse, because the banks hold our money. Right? So if you let the banks collapse, We are at risk. It is our investment that the banks are lending. So we have a responsibility to protect the banking industry also.
This is same to the government banks or the private banks. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter either way. The government banks also functioning independently, right? So the government banks have a kind of sovereign guarantee. If something happens to the investors, the government will come and step in and help. Private banks don't have that. But either way, they're banks.
Yes.
They are independent businesses, so you need to protect. Normally, when a stimulus is given, the government has to come and fund that. Government has to support that. My understanding is, even in this case, government has put aside some money. It is based on that money, government has asked banks to lower the interest rate. But how that mechanism works, perhaps is not yet properly communicated down the line. Sometimes the problem may be officials below the line, not understanding, not communicating to the next level, etc. But you have to keep working at it. You have to keep communicating. Everybody must get together and work together to come out of this crisis. But you can't let the banks take the total brunt of the situation.
What's your forecast for the next 3 to 6 months for Sri Lanka?
See, next up to next 6 months, entire world will struggle. That's the reality, because this is a global crisis. It's very different to many other crises that we have experienced before.
This is very different to the financial crisis in 2000.
The financial crisis was to some extent confined to certain regions, large countries with financial systems. This is a global issue. This affects the entire world. So therefore, everybody has to accept the reality. It is not going to be easy. However, not everything is going to collapse, because there are opportunities that are coming up at the same time. Take, for example, simple example, rubber industry. The rubber industry, now we are a rubber exporting company. Now how much demand will now grow for rubber gloves and protective gear and that kind of stuff. Now, just took one example. So likewise, there are many industries which will thrive in this situation.
To add to that is the fact that, even the face masks, there was a dearth of face masks. Here we started, manufacturing our own, and then there's ample amount right now. So that kind of particular, rethinking a little bit of, restructuring of your business might actually help you. Doctor, the other thing is now there's a task force that has been appointed by the president to revive economy and to make sure that, we get back on track. Now, do they have to reinvent the wheel, or do they? What is your take on that? What should the goal be for them? At the end of the day, I'm not a fan of handing outs. That is not going to work for Sri Lanka in the future. It might work for like 2 months, 3 months until the next election. But then again, what's going to happen down the line? 10 years, where are we going to be? So what is your take on the task force? When
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came to power, he came up with a very clear vision, a set of policies and plans in place. So as far as the economy is concerned, he presented his plan. What are the priorities? What are the focus areas? So if everything went as per the plan, by now we would have had our elections, ministers would have been in place, there would have been ministries responsible for various functions, and they would have started execution of the plan.
But unfortunately, in Parliament as well.
Hopefully. But now, what is the situation? We haven't had the elections. We don't have ministers in place. So somebody has to run the country. So therefore, our president has now appointed a task force, putting the officials and some experienced former politicians to that, to do this, because there's no other mechanism available. And they are supposed to implement the president's policies. The policies have not changed. Only the circumstances have changed. Certain things have become priority.
Do those policies still fit?
Policies cannot change. Policies cannot change. For example, we were preaching the need for self-sufficiency in agricultural products. Has that changed? Yeah. And in fact, this crisis proved that we were right. We were always saying that, we need to improve the use of technology, distance education, work from home, etc. Now, again, this crisis has proven that we were right. So most of the things that were in President's policies have become necessities today. So, but who is there to implement? No government. So that is why the task force is in place. So they are simply doing implementation of that policy and also taking certain decisions which are based on circumstances.
What should be the immediate measures taken by that particular task force with regard to the people in the lower tier of income? Because you have the middle income level and then the lower tier. What exactly? Because when that even though what you very correctly say, this particular crisis have proven how vital that last tier is, the laborers, the people who clean our roads, our gardens and everything, how important that they are to the economy. So what should the action be in order to make sure that they are taken care of?
Yeah. See, we also don't believe in subsidies forever. People must be productive. People must be making a contribution to the economy. That's the right way to move forward. But in a crisis like that, when there are large thousands and thousands of people who have no income, it is the responsibility of the government to step in and help. That is what the government is doing right now. Even this 5,000 rupee allowance that is given is because of that purpose. And there's another purpose, as I mentioned earlier, there's another way of keeping the money circulation happening, because that is also important for the economy. We can't do this for a long period,
yes,
but at least for a short period, maybe 2 to 3 months, I think the government will have to do that, because otherwise they will not have work. Even though you open the economy, that doesn't mean that from the following day onwards they are going to have an income.
The biggest other question, yes, we should keep giving these kinds of handouts for another 3, 4, whatever the time period. Where is this money going to come from? Because the coffers are empty.
No, that's true. The government is not plucking money from trees. Government have to look at ways of borrowing money. Maybe central bank will have to look at releasing money to the system, etc. So these are not unusual solutions. Everywhere in the world, when there's a crisis like that, when there's a recession like that, the monetary policy and the fiscal policy solutions, instruments kick in. This is one such thing. So you have to release money somehow, and then you need to earn that money thereafter.
The other thing is about the debt ceiling. The government apparently right now has gone beyond what is supposed to be done, and a lot of people are saying that there could be some kind of repercussions of this. What is your take on this? Are we borrowing to a point where we really can't come back?
I think we were borrowing too much money unnecessarily if you look at the last couple of years. When 2015, when the previous government came to power, already we had about 80% of GDP debt level, 7,400 billion rupees at that level. People were critical of that, saying that is too much. But unfortunately, rather than reducing that, the previous government added to that. The 7,400 billion went up to 14,000 billion. And the question is not borrowing. Where did that money go? That money did not go into investments. It's okay to borrow as long as you put that money into productive, cash generating assets. But instead of that, when you consume that money, it's gone. So right now we are in a situation, yes, there's a huge debt burden. We have a lot of money to be settled even this year. But that doesn't mean we can stop borrowing. That's the reality. These are all stories that you can go on without borrow. You can't. But right now you have to borrow. But whatever you borrow, we must see how best you utilize that money to grow our economy. Invest that money so that money will be generated for us to pay back.
What are the investment areas you see that we should, right now, the government should be, looking at?
Take for example ports, right? The Colombo port is right now doing very well compared to most of the regional ports. If you talk to people who are involved in the ports and the industry related to that, they all say that it was growing very well and there's so much opportunities. And also with this corona crisis, with India struggling, most of their ports being closed, there's demand for Sri Lankan port to operate. But there's still certain infrastructure requirements which have to be met. So these are areas you can focus. So you need to identify what are the growth opportunities, growth industries, and make sure that you provide the infrastructure.
The government?
Government has to come in and provide the infrastructure for those industries to thrive. And of course, wherever you can bring for the investment, you can do that. You should do that. but the government also has a role to play.
Like what you said about the agriculture, being self-sufficient, and that kind of a policy is exactly what President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was looking at prior to this election, before this crisis came. What do you think about the economic, dependency? We are depending heavily on foreign countries at the end of the day. If China shuts their doors, we're done. That kind of a situation. So how exactly can we turn that particular mentality of borrowing from those countries over and over again, and yet have a better circulation of funds within internally? Is that possible?
You can. See, now that you mentioned about economy, agriculture area, agriculture contributed something like 7.2% of GDP last year. Very low. Given the fact 30% of the people, like 25 to 35% of the people live based on agriculture, this percentage shows that they are so poor. So that is why you need to invest into that area, bring technology to that area, increase productivity so that their livelihoods will also improve. But that does not mean you are going to do everything with an agriculture economy. Agriculture has to grow. It can generate a lot of money. It will have a lot of opportunities. But that's not the only thing. The service industry and the manufacturing industry, both, the focus should always be there, because the big opportunities will be in those industries. For example, IT industry. So much opportunities will be there for us. Likewise, there are so many other industries. There are growth opportunities. So we must focus on all those. But when it comes to agriculture, it's such a shame that a country with such a good opportunity for us to develop as a good agricultural based country, why are we importing food items? Right? We are even importing fish. That shouldn't be the case.
Is it because the fact that successive governments have failed to put in proper plans to harvest that particular, let's take rice. Once a normal farmer, cultivates rice, he doesn't have a mechanism to go and sell it. We did talk about, selling it through your mobile app or having that kind of a, high-tech version of it. But, do you think that's the only reason, or are there other reasons that contribute to that factor?
See, the lack of interest in agriculture in our country has a history. Once the economy opened up in 1977, we started following this global trend, rather the globalization trend. And the thinking was that if you can bring something cheaper from abroad, why do you manufacture it here? Comparative advantage, which talks in economics. But the world learned that it is not the right way to move forward, because the globalization eventually helped the large companies, eventually helped the multinational corporations. It increased the gap between the poor and the rich. So a lot of companies have started realizing that's not probably the only way to move forward. You must start protecting your own industries also to some extent. So agriculture focus we need to bring because of that reason. Now we started talking about that. Now many countries do the same thing elsewhere.
All right, a lot more to discuss about the economy as well as we move on after this crisis and Sri Lanka gets back to work next week. We hope that we continue to maintain the official guidelines given by our health authorities, and yet make sure that we bring our country back, because all the responsibility lies between you and me. Let's take a short commercial break. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa. Welcome back, everyone, to Get Real. I'm in conversation with Dr. Nalaka Godahewa with regard to the economic issues we might face as we move on and as we step out of this crisis situation, the coronavirus crisis. Doctor, one of the things that is heavily discussed these days, it's not the coronavirus crisis, but apparently elections. I know you are vying for a parliament seat from Gampaha, and what is your take on this? Elections are getting pushed by the day. Very recently, the Samagijana Balawegaya, led by Sajid Premadasa, opposition leader, went and filed a complaint in the Supreme Court saying July 20th is not a viable date. Okay, so we are pushing the date. I understand the health concerns, but then again, countries like South Korea held their elections, parliamentary elections. There are guidelines given by health authorities saying, this is how you have to conduct if you're conducting an election. What's your take on this? Are we going to sit and wait, or should we do something else?
No, I think first of all we must understand that there's a necessity for stable government. If you look at all the developed countries in this region, if you analyze why they are developed like that, that is because they had the political stability for a very long period. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, this is the problem we always had. We had politically unstable situation due to various reasons. And then after the war, we saw a lot of economic development. That was numbers showed that things were happening. But since 2015 again, we had a very unstable government. A government which had a president and a prime minister who had two different policies going in two different directions. An absolute mess, right? Eventually nothing happened because of this political instability. We were always debating the legal issues. There is no point debating legal issues if the country is not developing at the end of the day. So now we have come to a situation, we have got a president who won with a landslide, a huge mandate of people to take the country forward. People went and voted for him to take the country forward, 6.9 million people. But for him to do that, he needs a stable government in place. Unfortunately for him, because of the 19th Amendment, he couldn't dissolve the parliament immediately and go for a parliamentary election. So he had to wait until the first opportunity comes. And during that time, he tried to work with the previous parliament, and it was proven that it couldn't because the parliament was refusing to help him with the finance management. So parliament was dissolved. Now we are waiting for a fresh parliament which will have people's mandate, which will represent the people's current thinking, not 2015 August thinking. And now we are again debating legal issues, trying to somehow bring back the old parliament, which has no acceptance amongst people. If you bring the old parliament back, due to whatever the reason, what benefit does it serve to the country? What new thing will happen as a result of that? Nothing is going to happen. It is only going to confuse everything. So when the question that you asked me what I think about it, what I think about it is, this is so unfortunate. We are going to get entangled again in this debate rather than focusing on what people want at this stage.
That's the thing. The loudest voiced out there is maybe the politicians, but the real thinking, the need of the people doesn't seem to be reflected, because most people do not want the old parliament to come back. They just want the president to handle things and make sure that that this entire process is being safeguarded by them, because we very well know if you open the parliament, at the end of the day we will have useless debates, blaming here, blaming there, nothing will get done. But right now our health officials, our military, every person involved is actually doing a tremendous job. Doctor, I want to get your take. You were talking previously before the break about the areas that we can actually develop. IT industry seems to be one of those areas that we can actually tap into the market in the global level. And right now, as we move out from the corona crisis and actually start again rebuilding our economy, because we've been rebuilding our economy for some time, like 2009. Now here we are once again doing that. What do you see? What are the opportunities in the IT sector that you see that we can actually benefit from?
Even during the presidential election, one thing that we were talking a lot about is the potential in the IT industry. Because if you look at the global development timelines, three revolutions we missed, right? Industrial revolutions. Now we are talking about this fourth industrial revolution, which is more IT driven, and we believe this is something that we can easily piggyback on. Our younger generation is ready for that. We have the know-how for that. So right now with this corona crisis, we can see more opportunities. The entire world is moving towards use of technology, working from home, distance education, home deliveries and so many opportunities.
We had people building robots to help in the coronavirus
so
crisis.
many things. So this is an opportunity for our IT people to come forward and develop their businesses. And that, again, one thing we must remember is when you develop the IT industry, the entire money that you generate come to the country. In certain industries...
How? Explain that.
Because your cost is here. Your cost is here. You're not bringing raw material from outside. It's your skill level. So your income that you generate is mostly coming back to the country. And some other industry where you import raw material to produce, like part of your income goes back as your expenses. Take a garment industry, for example, a $5.5 billion revenue, one of the largest industries in the country. But out of the 2.5 billion goes back as raw material to some other country. So you are eventually getting about 2.5 or more as your real income. Whereas IT industry is generating already more than 1 billion.
How much are we generating right now from the IT industry?
Just over 1 billion. Just over 1 billion, but the IT industry was always predicting that they can take it about 3 to 4 billion within the next 4 to 5 years' time.
This is mainly the backlog work, like if you take the banking sector, the IT, processing things like that?
No, most of our guys are actually producing for other countries. Even large companies like Google sometimes use software developed by our people. Sometimes they come as direct businesses, sometimes they come through subcontracts, right? But if we build our own brands, if we build our own identity, there's so much opportunities for our guys to develop the IT industry.
Yes, it's a good opportunity. Yes, if we can build our brands, but there is a massive question with regard to marketing. Sri Lanka is actually in a very low scale when it comes to, RTE is known all around the world, but that's it. What else? Coconuts, Thailand is taking over. They're actually, if you've seen, they've nicely, cut the coconut and serving it in a proper manner. And if you any other industry, even textile industry, India is taking over, made in India or made in China. So how exactly? Yes, we have to do that, but then again, we have to market this as well.
Absolutely. This is one area we are very focused on. These are the things where our government institutes also must work very closely with the private sector to do. For example, EDB has a very, very important role to play here. I'm glad that we have got some good technocrats there now, developing strategies, developing plans, looking at the future. And I'm sure when they work like that, things will change. Now, one thing that we were very particular once this new government came to power, after the president came to power, was placing the right people at these government institutes. Because you must understand the world, you must understand the industries, then only you understand the need for marketing and other things that we do. So we have now brought in a lot of people who have that business exposure, world experience, and they seem to be now coming up with good plans. And once those good plans are converted to real action, I think a lot of these things will change.
The other area that I want to get your take on is the airline industry. Sri Lankan Airlines now might see a massive debt as we go on year because of the coronavirus and the shutdown, the lockdown of the airport and all that. What is your take? How can Sri Lankan Airlines actually? Do you think we have to sell the whole brand once again, like what we did in the
I
90s?
was always against selling Sri Lankan Airlines. I've always maintained that even during the worst times. So the problem with Sri Lankan Airlines was always a management issue or a strategy issue, right? And things that we could have done, we didn't do at the right time. Things we shouldn't have done, we did. That's what happened. It's not the principle of having an airline. A country needs an airline like that. I mean, during this crisis, who went to India to bring our people, who went to Wuhan to bring our people, right? Now, when we want to now develop tourism, who will help us? Flying direct to those tourism destinations that the tourism industry will want to, right? All those can be done only when you have your own airline. But one problem with the Sri Lankan airline was the fuel cost, which was a huge burden for the airline. Bulk of its cost is on fuel. Going forward, there will be some relief. We now see the entire world, the fuel costs have come down. It will go up from the current level, but not heavily.
Yeah.
It will still stabilize probably at about $40 per barrel at most. So the biggest cost burden that the Sri Lankan airline has will not be there for some time. So Sri Lankan airline should know where to focus now, how to collaborate with industry like tourism and join together to grow the business. Sometimes you should not just look at the airline and look at the profitability of the airline, because there are a lot of indirect economic benefits that an airline can bring.
The other thing is most of the routes that Sri Lankan Airlines is carrying does not bring in big spenders. Very recently, yesterday, I think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa says that tourism should be now focusing on big spenders. That means we have to fly back into Europe, fly back into America, actually go to America. The Middle East is a big market. Do you agree with that strategy?
There are a lot of things that airline industry has to do to develop. Take Sri Lankan airline out. Sri Lanka has a huge potential to develop as a regional airline hub. But to do that, a lot of restrictions have to be removed. Sometimes, now why Sri Lankan airline is struggling, government also try to protect it too much. Not allowing other airliners to come and operate from Sri Lanka as a hub. In order to protect that, we shouldn't do. We must allow other airlines also to come. Then only the connectivity will improve. Let Sri Lankan airline compete. Let Sri Lankan airline struggle. That doesn't matter. Once the country develops as a hub, there will be so much opportunities. It's not only passenger transportation where you can make money. There are a lot of other services that you can provide. There are a lot of engineering services and other services that Sri Lankan Airlines is currently providing, which can be expanded if Sri Lanka develops as a airline.
Are you talking about the Singapore model for Singapore Airlines?
Singapore Airlines as well as Emirates, right? They are large businesses. You can't compare one-to-one with Sri Lankan Airlines. But they develop themselves as hubs. That is what we must be looking at.
It's not just per se the airline, but
not just the
industry. The other you just touched about, finally, I just wanted to get your take, we're running out of time, is the fact that the oil prices, now it has come drastically low. We are not even importing oil because people are not moving around. There's a huge saving there. What do you think? How can we manage this? There is a saving happening at this moment as well, but then there is the debt burden on the other side. What is your take?
See, when you look at overall economic management, you must remember why there's a saving from fuel. There's so much additional expenditure that come into the picture because of the current situation. Crisis. Now, you at the very beginning, you asked me from where does handouts come from. That's government money. So government has to strike a balance. So government can't reduce the oil price on one side and then give all these handouts, which are essential at this stage. So let the government do the management of those things. Of course, fuel prices must be reasonably adjusted at the right time. I'm sure government will do that.
How's your campaign going?
Campaign is doing very well. I think people are far more educated than ever before about the political situation.
More interested in hearing from you. What exactly are you hearing from the people in the Gampaha area?
I think people are looking for a change. And that change they're expecting from the president. They believe in president's vision. They want the president's vision to be executed. And in order to execute the president's vision, they understand that you need right people in the parliament. People who understand that vision and execute. So hopefully at this election, they will do the right thing. So we are looking forward to it.
If we actually have one very soon. Thank you very much, Dr. Nalaka Godahewa. We are running out of time. Thank you very much coming back and actually giving us a very good understanding about the economy and the hardship we might face. What we really need to understand is the fact that we are all in this together and we all need to get out of it safe and make sure that the country flourishes once again. Come back again when you have time. Thank you very much for watching Get Real for this Thursday. I'll be back next week as well, but tonight I'll be back again at 9:35 World News. Bye for now.